Of all the rich dialogue relating to transforming education, the conversation regarding learner agency is perhaps the most difficult. It challenges our mindset and the very structure of school as it exists today. As a result, many avoid engaging in what is perhaps the most crucial shift we can make in our practice and the one which will most benefit our learners. So during this moment we share, let's agree to set our concerns aside and with joyful curiosity explore the fantastic potential of learner agency together. Let's begin with a change in perspective. We should not see learning as the outcome of teaching, but rather teaching to become a mindful response to learning. A farmer doesn't create rice. A farmer plants, prays, and serves the needs of his seeds. And to be a farmer is to live a life of service, humility, adaptability, and patience. Similarly, we do not create learning and must recognize our role is to cultivate it by serving the needs of the learners. Just like farming, teaching is a life of service, humility, adaptability, and patience. Many times I have asked this question to audiences: who's responsible for the learning in your classroom and in your school? I want to pause just for a few seconds and let you consider how you might answer. Usually, I can ask this question and then sit back and watch the sparks fly as it provokes some very heated discussion. Is it the teachers, the administration, the learners, the parents? Perhaps you feel it's some combination of them. And if so, I would ask what percentage to assign to each and why. Now, let's take a moment to breathe and forget about that question. If instead we consider who is responsible for the learning in your life, now your response might be different. It's most difficult for us to argue that learning is anyone else's responsibility in our life. Learning is a process of acquiring new understanding, knowledge, behaviors, skills, values, attitudes, and preferences. Notice acquiring. No one can acquire for us. We must do it for ourselves. Now further, human learning starts at birth and continues until death as a consequence of ongoing interactions between people and their environment. The learner is essential to the process. Without the learner, learning cannot happen. However, the teacher is not essential to the process. Learning can and does take place without the teacher. Now this, of course, triggers the anxiety and the conversation around agency. If learners are responsible for the learning, then what is the role of the teacher? And the teacher may not be essential to the process, but is still of incredible value if they understand their role. Now, let's go back to the analogy of the farmer. A teacher who shovels a scope and sequence of content onto learners every day would be like a farmer who shovels compost on a heavy field. In small doses at the right time, it can trigger massive growth. But when done constantly, it would only bury the field in, well, I think the metaphor is pretty clear. Now let's explore the role of the teacher more, but first, let's create some clarity around the terms voice and agency, which are used together or interchangeably in education, and this further complicates the conversation. Clarity is freedom from illusion and delusion. It's a lucidity of perception and understanding that eliminates indistinctness and ambiguity. Clarity creates a common understanding that allows us to move forward. Now, these statements that I'm going to show you are from the Victorian Department of Education, but they are so ambiguous that it is highly unlikely a school could create a successful program. So the criteria is my students, firstly, set high expectations for themselves and feel motivated and empowered to exercise agency. High on what scale? By what would we determine if they feel motivated? Is our outcome only that we wish for them to feel motivated and empowered to exercise agency, or do we actually want them to do it? A second is that they have a growth mindset, believe they can learn and build their knowledge and skills through effort. What is growth mindset and how is it measured? That term is different depending on who you speak to. Is agency merely a belief they can learn, but only through effort? Or is it something more? The last one is, can represent their school and students as confident members of a student leadership team. This has nothing whatsoever to do with agency and relates more to voice, which brings us to the question of what is the difference between voice and agency. I really want to make this as clear as possible and as simple as possible. So let me state this. If learners have voice, they have a vote. If they have agency, they have autonomy. Voice and agency are two completely different things. Consider who's in control in each case. With student voice, they have input, but no real control over decisions. But when they're autonomous, they are completely in control and have agency. Now, let's reflect on the remote learning opportunity over the first few months of the global pandemic. On March 10th, I flew from Japan to Australia on a flight with only a handful of crew and passengers, and like most of us, I had no idea what was coming. But by April 15th, 195 countrywide school closures were impacting 1.5 billion learners, with a total enrollment of about 90% of the total enrollment globally. That is some very, very startling numbers in under 30 days. And the way industry and education adapted to this was very dramatically different. Australia, by many measures, led the world. So when we look at how the world adapted to remote learning, remote working protocols, nearly 1/3, 29% of Australians reported holding fewer meetings while working remotely. And the highest number globally, 51%, state productivity had increased under remote working protocols. 1/3 of Australians, about 36%, started their workday earlier in response to remote work conditions. Imagine going to work even earlier. But it didn't stop there. And craving the social side of the office, Australia also had the highest levels, 80% of employees who stated they missed catching up and interacting with their teammates daily. However, 54% still noted that they would like to continue working remotely even when their physical offices reopen. And despite the physical distance, 40% felt more connected to their managers, more than any other nation. In addition, 3/4, 76%, agreed that their managers were more supportive in managing and communicating goals than before. Just staggering numbers. In education, however, when the going gets tough, the tough get traditional. So instead of seeing the incredible opportunity to completely transform teaching and learning, many schools tried to do exactly what they had been doing, except over video conference. Somehow they imagined that all the learners would just show up on time, there'd be no tech issues, and there'd be all these smiling faces eagerly ready to learn. And despite our best intentions, this didn't quite work out as expected. Many teachers found their day completely lost in repeating over and over in extra sessions to learners that were absent the content they presented to some in the first session. That is a lot of shoveling compost. So without really debriefing too much today about what worked well and what didn't work well, I mean, we know this didn't work well. I don't really want to talk too much about remote learning, but I do want to talk about one thing that we should take away from remote learning, and it relates directly to agency. And that is that the one lesson is that we must never, ever, ever do content delivery synchronously again. If we learned nothing else, this should be the one thing that we learned. Content is ubiquitous. Our learners have instantaneous access to the sum total of human knowledge in the palm of their hands. They can and do learn what they need to, what they want to learn, when they want to learn, and how they want to learn it. Our children already have agency and are master learners over the learning in their own life. So why should it be any different in school? Earlier, I asked this question: Who's responsible for the learning in your classroom and in your school? In the traditional structure of schools, it is designed around the teacher. There is no agency. Learners are merely agents of the teacher. And let me explain a little bit about what that means. In traditional school structures, there is one teacher and many learners. However, this diagram does not reflect the reality, because in truth, every one of those learners is completely unique. We group them and get together in a manner that's convenient for us, but not necessarily what is best for their learning. In truth, our programs are optimized for delivering to a single learner and a single cluster of learners on a single day. The concept being that some will be more and less successful with this process. And that's exactly what happens, and we refer to them as the happy middle. But, in fact, some learners will thrive in this. Some learners will do really, really well in this and far exceed the happy middle. And we might refer to them as gifted or advanced because of their success. We might reward them with some degree of agency or self-regulation, allow them to choose or explore or create things that are highly relevant to them. Others, however, do not fare so well. And we provide various labels for them. And in response, we control the learning even more. It's more prescribed, more focused on a single discipline and on knowledge delivery. We actually do precisely what ended in their failure to begin with, except we do it louder and slower, and we expect a different result. I'm really concerned about the labels of gifted and talented, as much as I am about the various labels we provide to learners who aren't successful. And that's not to say there are no truly gifted individuals, nor learners of determination. However, the measure of this should not be based against their performance as agents of the teacher. Having agency is completely opposite to being a teacher agent. Agents have prescribed learning, where agency is very self-determined. As agents, there's low relevance to the learning, and with agency, it is highly relevant. As agents, teachers assess after the learning, but agency requires the learners to assess as learning. As agents, teachers talk, students listen, but with agency, learners and their mentors actively discuss. Notice there the role shifts from teacher to mentor. As agents, the output is focused on knowledge delivery, and with agency, this shifts to knowledge creation. As teacher agents, they are typically operating in a single discipline, where agency transcends discipline. Teacher agents are highly controlled, and agency absolutely requires self-regulation. So ultimately, it comes down to those three elements: control, choice, and pace. If these are the responsibility of the teacher, we require agents to be compliant. If these are in the hands of the learner, however, we create agency. Now, we cannot place responsibility for learning on the teacher and challenge them to differentiate instruction and for every learner to allow those learners to thrive. We must completely flip our thinking on the matter and focus on agency, allowing and supporting learners to be responsible for their own learning. After all, it is their learning. This means instead of one teacher and many students, we will have one student with many teachers. And not just human teachers, not from a single space or at a specific time or at a specific location or through a specific methodology. It means something completely different. Now, at the beginning of our conversation, I said that just as a farmer serves the needs of the seeds, teachers serve the needs of the learners. The agents model does not serve our learners' needs. Agency is not optional. It is an essential shift for us. When a learner first enters school, they're given a great deal of agency with some structure. But as they move throughout their academic career, instead of providing more agency, we progressively take it away. More focus and more responsibility is placed on the teacher. I believe if you asked most Year 12 students what the topics will be next term or even next week, they would have absolutely no idea. But when they graduate and go to university or in their life beyond school, they'll be expected to be fully functioning independent learners. How is that possible in the short time between the end of Year 12 and the beginning of their academic or other career? Now, in our Learning Intentions Masterclass, learners as young as kindergarten are unpacking curricular objectives and building their own success criteria against levels of Bloom's. This is not just happening at kindergarten, but happening at all levels. Imagine kindergarten children able to unpack the success criteria of the curriculum, build it against Bloom's taxonomy. And we found that learners at every level respond to agency with enthusiasm and deep capacity when schools have the courage to let go of the illusion of control. We must accept the truth that all learners are on their own unique learning pathway, and as such, they must have their own individual learning plan. Structures, systems, and traditions should be created or removed to facilitate this reality. My hope from today is that teachers recognize that agency does not make them irrelevant. It makes them more important than ever, but as mentors. And I would ask you to please find the strength, not to have difficult conversations, but to have courageous conversations. Conversations about the structures, systems, and traditions that must be created or removed in your unique environment to move from agents to agency. Please join us in the Future Focused Learning Network and let us support you in your journey. Thank you for taking this time to be together today. Thank you for your commitment to our learners and to their learning. We appreciate you so much.